Some mysteries refuse to rest. They persist across decades, resisting explanation, growing more unsettling with each passing year as new evidence emerges only to deepen the enigma. Among these enduring puzzles, few have captured the world's imagination like the incident that occurred on the eastern slopes of Kholat Syakhl, the Mountain of the Dead, in the winter of 1959. The Americans called it the Soviet hiking mystery. When news finally reached Western shores, the Russians called it simply the incident. Today, we know it as the Dyatlov Pass incident, perhaps the most disturbing unsolved mystery of the 20th century. It began innocently enough. 10 experienced hikers and ski tourists from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, led by 23-year-old engineering student Igor Dyatlov, set out to traverse the northern Urals during the winter break. All were young, fit, and seasoned outdoor enthusiasts. Their plan was ambitious but calculated. A 190-mile ski trek through some of the Soviet Union's most remote and challenging terrain in February, when temperatures routinely plunged to -30 degrees. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women. Most were students or graduates of the institute: Igor Dyatlov, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinina, Yuri Krivoneshenko, Alexander Kolovetov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustim Slobodin, Nikolai Thibobrignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. The 10th member, Yuri Yudin, would be the only survivor, having turned back early due to health concerns. On January 28th, the 9 remaining hikers reached the edge of their planned route and prepared to cross the pass. They sent their last photographs and diary entries to be mailed home, snapshots of smiling faces against stark, snow-covered landscapes. In their journals, they wrote of good spirits despite the building snowstorm. One photograph, taken seemingly moments before whatever happened, shows the group setting up camp for the night on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, pitched against the inclement weather rather than continuing to more sheltered grounds just 3 kilometers away. It would be their final campsite. When the group failed to return, search parties were dispatched on February 20th. What rescuers discovered has defied explanation for over 60 years. The hiker's tent was found ripped open from the inside. Footprints showed that the group had fled into the subzero night without proper clothing, some wearing only socks, others barefoot, no one in their full winter gear despite the lethal temperatures. The prints in the snow told a chaotic story. 9 people running, stumbling, walking, and crawling away from the safety of their tent toward the tree line, 1.5 kilometers downslope. Most disturbing was the clear evidence that whatever sent them fleeing in terror had originated inside the tent. The first 2 bodies, those of Yuri Krivoneshenko and Yuri Doroshenko, were found by a small cedar tree at the edge of the forest. They were shoeless and dressed only in underwear. Nearby, the branches of the cedar were broken up to 5 meters high, and remnants of a small fire were found. Despite the nearby firewood that could have sustained them through the night, the fire had been allowed to die out. 3 more victims, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, were found at various points between the cedar and the tent, positioned as if they had been attempting to return to camp before succumbing to hypothermia. Their postures suggested they had died while still in motion. It took 2 more months to locate the remaining 4 hikers, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine further into the woodland. These final victims presented the most disturbing evidence of all. Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her facial tissue. Zolotaryov had missing eyeballs. Thibobrignol's skull had been crushed by an impact equivalent to a car crash, yet with no external trauma to his skin. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures that doctors compared to those sustained in high-speed car accidents, injuries requiring a force of over 700 kilograms to inflict. Yet again, their skin remained unbroken. Their clothing contained high levels of radiation. One victim's body contained unexplained traces of silver and aluminum. A roll of film was recovered from a camera found around the neck of one hiker. When developed, the photos showed nothing but darkness with strange, glowing orbs of light. The Soviet authorities quickly closed the investigation, attributing the deaths to an unknown compelling force. The area was sealed off to hikers and visitors for 3 years following the incident. The files were classified, the bodies buried, and the story suppressed. But some records escaped the purge. KGB Commander Major Ortakov, who led the official investigation, reportedly told his family before his death that the hikers had seen something they were not meant to see. The testimonies of the Mansi people, indigenous to the region, described the mountain as a place to be avoided, a place where the wind speaks with voices of the dead. Their legends tell of strange lights on the slopes, of hunters who camped there and returned changed, if they returned at all. Dr. Akalina Pavlova, an independent researcher who gained access to declassified documents in 2019, discovered an anomaly in the official timeline. There is a gap of approximately 40 minutes in the chronology based on camera timestamps and journal entries. She told me during our interview, whatever initiated the crisis occurred during this window, and there is evidence that a significant amount of related documentation was deliberately removed from the files. Perhaps most chilling are the reports from the search party members themselves. Several described strange orange spheres in the sky over the mountain during their operation. Lead investigator Lev Ivanov later admitted being ordered to remove any mention of these from the official findings. Mikhail Sherevin, one of the volunteers who found the first bodies, broke his decades-long silence in a 2007 interview with a Russian newspaper. The bodies did not look like they had been dead for 2 weeks in those conditions, he said. There was something unnatural about their preservation and their expressions. I've never spoken about this before, but their faces showed something beyond fear. It was as if they had seen something the human mind cannot process. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the case, ultimately concluding that an avalanche had caused the tragedy. However, this explanation fails to address numerous inconsistencies. The radiation on the clothing, the odd internal injuries with no external trauma. Why experienced hikers would cut open their tent from the inside rather than using the entrance. Or why they would flee into certain death without proper clothing. It doesn't explain why the search dogs initially refused to follow the trail, or why military personnel were quickly brought in to replace civilian searchers. It doesn't explain the multiple witness accounts of strange lights in the sky that night from observers up to 50 kilometers away. In 2018, an American backpacker named Connor Williams traveled to Dyatlov Pass against all warnings, equipped with modern gear and satellite communication. I need to know what happened there, he told friends before departing. His last transmission was a confused audio message. Something's moving outside the tent. Jesus Christ. The snow it's vibrating. There's nothing here, but can you hear that? Can you hear that sound? Williams' body was found 2 days later by Russian authorities, who attributed his death to hypothermia. His camera, satellite phone, and journal were never recovered. The story of Dyatlov Pass has spawned countless theories. Military testing gone wrong, infrasound-induced panic, toxic mushrooms, Yeti attacks, secret weapons experiments, and extraterrestrial encounters. Each theory addresses some elements of the mystery while failing to encompass all the evidence. Perhaps that's why the incident continues to haunt us, because, at its core, it suggests that something exists in our world that defies conventional categories of threat and danger. Something that can drive 9 rational, experienced people to flee the safety of shelter into deadly conditions. Something that leaves evidence so contradictory that even the most rational minds must confront the possibility of the impossible. The slopes of Kholat Syakhl are accessible to tourists today. Those who visit report an oppressive silence that seems to absorb all sound. Many describe a peculiar sensation of being watched, Some have recorded unusual equipment, malfunctions, and inexplicable drops in temperature. Very few claim to have heard, in the howling wind that sweeps across those frozen slopes, what sounds like desperate voices speaking in Russian, calling for help that never came. As Igor Dyatlov wrote in his final diary entry, found in the abandoned tent, "Now we know the snowmen exist." The next line was crossed out so thoroughly that forensic analysis has never been able to recover it. Whatever happened on that frozen mountain in 1959 remains unresolved, but perhaps some mysteries are meant to stay that way, some truths too disturbing to be dragged into the light. For now, 9 weathered crosses stand on the slopes of the Mountain of the Dead, silent sentinels to a terror that has no name. And in the deepest winter nights, when the wind howls across the pass, locals say it carries echoes of that February night. 9 voices screaming in unison at something no living person has seen and survived to describe.